Welcome back to Unpacking the Trunk Costumes. My name is Kelly, and today's project is going to be part of hashtag Home for the Holidays 2020. When I was a kid, one of my favorite series of books was the Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and one of my favorite TV series was the Little House series. I've just learned that my niece has started reading the Little House books, and that inspired me to go looking for reruns, which I found on the Hallmark Channel. I've often had those reruns playing on my computer here in my sewing room as I've been working. One afternoon, I was here in my sewing room working on something, and I had Little House playing in the background. I looked up and I saw the character Sarah Reed Parker, played by the lovely Pamela Roylance, and in the scene she was wearing a lovely nightgown and robe. So I went through other episodes of season 9 and I took some screenshots of her wearing that nightgown and robe, and I thought, what better project for Home for the Holidays 2020 than a nightgown and a cozy robe? The gown is a simple white cotton with a button placket and lace around the collar and long cuffed sleeves. The robe appears to be a black and white checkered cotton. It has a very full skirt, and on the collar there appears to be a small ruffle, the same kind of fabric. The bell-shaped sleeves end just below elbow length, and it has a ruffle along the edge. So let's start with the gown. I found an older Butterick pattern, 4903. I chose a white Kona cotton for it. I had white buttons and cotton lace in my stash, plus a little interfacing, so I was ready to go. I altered the yoke pattern just a little to fit my shoulders better, and I went ahead and I cut out the gown. I felt like the yoke needed a little something else, so I turned to my newly organized fabric stash. Thanks, Lady Rebeca Fashions, for the inspiration. And I decided on this eyelet fabric that had once been a dust ruffle for a bed. I simply cut the yoke out of both fabrics and stitched them together. Then I gave them a good pressing, and off camera I attached the fusible interfacing to the button placket. Next, I pinned the yoke front to the back and stitched them together. Here I am stay stitching the neck edge of the gown to keep it from stretching. Then I pinned and sewed on the white cotton lace to the neck edge. The placket is folded back to the outside of the garment and stitched down along the top. The neck edge is finished with bias tape. Here I am ironing out one edge of the bias tape, then pinning the bias tape over the top of the lace on the neck edge. And then I stitched it down. I folded the bias tape to the inside and pressed it flat. Then carefully hand stitched the tape down to the inside. I hand gathered the top of the gown, evening the gathers along the top, and pinned the gathered edge to the yoke. And then I sewed it down. Pattern did not call for cuffs, so I made my own. I started with strips of fabric that were a little longer than my wrists, plus some seam allowance. Then I added the same lace I used along the neckline and made a lace sandwich with the outside and inside parts of the cuff. Off camera, I sewed up 3 edges of the cuff, leaving the untrimmed edge open. The sleeve needed a placket, so I made one. I just didn't sew the sleeve sides all the way down to the bottom. So I folded a narrow double hem along the cut edges to create the placket. I then gathered the bottom of each sleeve and adjusted the gathers to fit the cuffs and pinned them in place. Then I sewed the inside edge of the cuff to the sleeves. Off camera, I pressed the sleeves flat, turned under the inside hem, and hand sewed the cuff closed. Next, I set in the sleeves to the arm size, pulling up the gathers I had sewed along the top edges. Then, I sewed on the sleeves. Off camera, I added the buttons and buttonholes to the yoke and the cuffs, and the gown was finished. I love its simplicity and touches of lace where they will be seen, and the eyelet fabric just adds the right extra touch. For the robe, I downloaded McCall's 7875, which had the right shape and skirt. I ended up redrawing the sleeves so they would be more bell-shaped. I also redrew the collar so it would be a little longer in the back. I studied the ruffles that were on a discontinued McCall's 3323 pattern I had and figured out what I'd need for those. I searched the internet and local fabric stores for a black and blue checkered cotton, but I didn't have any luck. Joann's was having a big sale on plaid flannel, and I found a nice blue-green black plaid, and the price was outstanding, so I decided on that. Let me introduce you to my new cobbled-together sewing table. I am so thankful I have it, because this skirt was huge. And so I set about cutting out all the pieces. And my dress form served as a handy place for putting the cut pieces on. First I pinned and sewed the bodice darts. I pressed them flat and then matched up the fronts to the back and sewed them together. I pressed my seams and then stay-stitched the neck edge of the bodice to keep it from stretching. Then it was ruffle time. I started by folding the pieces I had cut for ruffles in half and pressed them flat. I had a lot of ruffle for the collar, and it was about that time I remembered a video that Stephanie from What's Sewing On did where she rolled up the long strip she was sewing to keep it manageable. Thanks, Stephanie. Then I switched to long stitches on my sewing machine and sewed the gathering stitches. After a long time of carefully gathering the ruffle to it, I pinned it to the collar, which I had applied fusible interfacing to. I machine basted the ruffle to the collar, and then I made a ruffle sandwich of the back and front sides of the collar and pinned them in place. Then I sewed the whole collar together. I I turned her right side out and I pressed it flat. I pinned the neck edge closed and hand basted the collar to the bodice. The edge of the collar is finished with bias tape, so I took some blue from my stash and pressed one side open, pinned it to the neck edge, and sewed it to the neck edge along the crease that was in the bias tape. Off camera, I sewed the other edge of the bias tape to the inside of the neck edge, making a nice finish. Now it was time for sleeve ruffles, which I pieced together. I folded them in half, as I'd done before, and pressed them flat. Off camera, I sewed gathering stitches and carefully pulled up the gathers so the ruffle would fit the base of the sleeves and sewed those on. I gathered the tops of the sleeves, I pinned them into the arm size and sewed them in. And here's the bodice with the sleeves. It looked pretty good. I did end up cutting the collar down just a little once the skirt was attached. It was a little bit long for some reason, but it worked out fine. I sewed the long skirt panels together, and then I sewed a stay stitch along the top edge of the skirt to keep it from stretching. It was a big and slightly heavy skirt by this time. I could not get a decent camera angle to show me stitching the bodice to the skirt because there was just so much fabric. Just take it on faith that I did. I folded in the front edges of the robe and then I sewed on the hem. Finally, I created some narrow inside ties for the robe and then interfaced and sewed up the belt. I also made some belt loops to help keep the belt in place. And there it is, the entire outfit. I am so pleased with this project. It is so comfortable and warm. The colors are really pretty, and all that ruffling was totally worth it. It may be hard to stay home this time of year, especially during this pandemic, but I am reminded of what I am truly grateful for. So, I will leave you with some quotes for this holiday season. The holiday season is a perfect time to reflect on our blessings and seek out ways to make life better for those around us. Terry Marshall. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. Helen Keller. If you want to be happy in a million ways for the holidays, you can't beat home sweet home. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a blessed, happy holiday season no matter where you are. If you liked what you saw today, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel and hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you next time.